There are moments that seem meaningless, yet carry enough force to turn the fate of a single person, even an entire empire. A morning at a luxury hotel overlooking San Francisco Bay, where crystal glasses glittered and the laughter of the elite blended like a symphony of power. Everything was arranged to be the perfect showcase for a love story worthy of a magazine cover. And yet, a single glass of orange juice, an innocent drink, or so it seemed, nearly became the sweetest blade. And in that very instant, amid the expensive suits and dazzling lights, a small voice broke through. "Don't drink that glass." It wasn't from a financial advisor, not from a bodyguard or an investor, but from an anonymous cleaning woman. A whisper that seemed out of place, yet it stripped bare an intricate conspiracy. From here, secrets began to align like chess pieces. A fiancé flawless in public, a powerful member of the board, and even a politician once protected by the system, all connected in a dark web. And the man seated at the center table, Graham Arden, the cold CEO of Arden Meridian Holdings, would be forced to answer a single question: who truly loved him, and who had only been waiting for the right moment to steal everything from his hands. This story is not merely about a glass of drugged orange juice. It is a journey from suspicion to truth, from betrayal to trust, and above all, proof that sometimes the one who saves us is not the powerful, but a nameless figure quietly standing in the corner. Stay until the very end, because what awaits after that whisper will keep you from looking away. There are lavish breakfast parties that feel like stages arranged to conceal traps. Every light shines on expensive dresses, every laugh is polished, and every crystal glass reflects a sweetness of power that is dangerous. And sometimes a single small detail, a glass of seemingly harmless orange juice, can bring down an entire empire. Seacliff Regent, the legendary hotel perched on a cliff overlooking San Francisco Bay, was awash in hazy sunlight that morning. The grand lobby had been turned into a hall reserved for powerful names, nine-figure investors, politicians seated in the front row, tech CEOs swallowing single-digit percentages of equity like gold. The center table was reserved for the host. Graham Arden, 42, stepped in wearing a charcoal suit tailored to every seam. People said he had the eyes of a gambler who had won too many hands, razor cold, composed, with a hollow behind them no one could read. A slight nod from him was enough to make the whole table rush to raise their glasses. Beside him sat Sienna Vale, his fiancée, and also the communications director. She was perfect, like a figure stepped out of a magazine. Brown wavy hair, crimson lips, a straight posture, her hand tracing graceful curves in the air as she chatted in Japanese with an investor from Tokyo. Every one of her smiles was like a syringe sweet and calculated. That morning's air was sugar-coated. The clink of cutlery was gentle, the laughter soft. The scent of Ethiopian coffee drifted on the sea breeze. One could have believed this was just a pristine morning of the wealthy, where everything was safe. But right amid that glamour, an offbeat detail appeared. In front of Graham sat a glass of orange juice, perfectly clear, light passing through it to cast an amber halo. No one asked if he wanted it. The server merely set it down, gave a slight nod, and vanished, as if it were the most natural thing. A little gesture of care in a vast sea of power. But Graham never ordered orange juice. He hated it, especially the artificial sweet-sour kind, common in conference carafes. A question pricked through his mind: who thought he needed it? Or more precisely, who wanted him to drink it? He lifted the glass, not to drink, only to rotate it gently. The liquid rippled, the light splashed across his face, reflecting a warped image of a CEO who seemed invincible. And then a voice cut in. "Don't drink that glass." The words weren't loud. They slid through the air like a thin blade, sharp enough to raise goose flesh. Graham turned, searching for the source. By a large column near the buffet, a woman in the dark blue uniform of housekeeping stood. In her hand was a damp cloth working at a stubborn stain. Leila Navarro. She didn't look straight at him. Her black hair was tied back, her sun-browned face so ordinary she could vanish into any crowd. Only her eyes lifted briefly still, without a tremor, without expectation. "What did you just say?" Graham asked, lowering his voice, compressed like a coded exchange. "There's something in it," Lila replied, her gaze still fixed on the stain. Her voice was quiet enough to reach only his ear amid the nearby table's laughter. "It's not normal orange juice. If you trust me, put it down. If you don't, drink it and you'll find out." Then she bent again and kept wiping, as if she'd said nothing at all. A brief silence pooled inside Graham. He had faced every kind of betrayal, a CFO cooking numbers, a sweet-talking politician pulling funding behind his back. But never had someone, an anonymous person with no power, no stake, stepped into his life with a whisper and drifted off like the wind. He set the glass down. The clink of crystal on tabletop was soft, but inside him it cracked like thunder. He signaled to Mateo Chen, his personal aide. "Take it. Send it to the lab now. I want the results today." Mateo nodded, no questions asked. That was why Graham kept him close. Few words, swift action. The whole breakfast carried on, but for Graham, everything moved in fog. He watched Sienna smile and realized that smile was too perfect enough to be fake. The handshakes around him turned meaningless. The only thing that remained was that voice, etched like a mark. "Don't drink." An hour later, the event ended. Investors trickled out. The opulent space thinned. Graham sat in a temporary office on the 9th floor of Seacliff Regent. His tablet screen lit up. A report from an independent laboratory had just arrived. Result: scopolamine low concentration, causing short-term memory loss, behavioral impairment, heightened suggestibility. Onset after 15 to 30 minutes. Graham read, his hand slowly tightening. Veins rose. He wasn't surprised. In this world, deceit and scheming were a common currency. What did surprise, even stun him, was that an anonymous woman, a housekeeper, had chosen to warn him instead of staying silent. That brief sentence spare, asking for nothing, weighed more than any multi-million-dollar contract. Without it, he might at this moment have been the victim of a perfect play. That night, from the penthouse on the hill, Graham looked out over San Francisco Bay. Yellow lights spread across the water like thousands of shards of broken mirror. In each shard, he saw himself again, an invincible CEO brought low by a single glass of orange juice. He remembered betrayals past by those he had once trusted, but no one had ever saved him for nothing. A hairline crack opened in his icy shell. Not fear, a curiosity laced with unease. He picked up the phone, his voice rough and low. "Mateo. Find her. Find Lila Navarro. I want to know who she is." Mateo was silent for a moment, then answered, "We tried. No records, no ID, no taxes, no insurance. As if she doesn't exist." Outside, waves pounded the rocks like drums. Graham closed his eyes. In the dark, he heard that whisper again. Not loud, not fierce, but keen as a blade. "Don't drink that glass." San Francisco in the late afternoon is often veiled in fog, but for Graham that day, everything felt thicker than the mist over the bay. He had just finished 3 back-to-back meetings, but his mind had no room left for charts or numbers. Only the image of a glass of orange juice and a small voice replayed in his head. Don't drink that glass. In his world, unconditional kindness did not exist. Everyone had a price. If not money, then power, influence, or reputation. And yet a woman in a cleaning uniform, invisible to most guests, had stepped into his life like that. Evening fell. The grand hall above was changing its face, preparing for a new cocktail party. But Graham did not head upstairs to the chandelier lights. Instead, he went down into the service basement where no CEO ever set foot. The smell of disinfectant mingled with old metal. Fluorescent lights flickered wearily. The corridor stretched long and narrow, concrete walls blotched, gray tiles scuffed by cartwheels. This was the part of Seacliff Regent no one pictured when speaking of it. A parallel world, quiet, forgotten beneath the glitter above. Swish, swish, echoed down the hall. The sound of a mop sweeping across the tiles. Graham stopped at the corner. Ahead, a slender figure, hair tied high, dressed in the dark blue uniform. Leila Navarro. She did not startle at the sight of him. She didn't flee, didn't avoid him. She only lifted her eyes briefly, then bent back to her work, as if his presence mattered no more than the stain on the floor. "Why did you do it?" Graham asked, his voice low, slow. Lila paused, her eyes drifting to the scuff mark on the toe of his leather shoe. She spoke softly, evenly, like reciting a technical note. "You're important. Dying from a glass of orange juice would be an ugly death. I hate ugly deaths." A long silence stretched. Graham stared at her, searching for hidden meaning. But her gaze was calm as a still lake, no fear, no defiance. Just truth. "Who are you?" he pressed, his voice hardening. She knelt, scrubbing harder at the stain. "A cleaner," she replied, then lifted her head to add a line that froze him. "But also someone who once stopped a death by orange juice." Today makes the second time a sting flickered through Graham's chest. "What are you implying?" Lila didn't answer right away. She wrung out her cloth, water dripping into the bucket. Then, for the first time that night, she looked directly at him. Those eyes, nearly expressionless, carried an uncommon weight, as if holding more than any one person should bear. He had seen every kind of gaze, greedy, fearful, lustful, deceitful. But this one was a cold kind of honesty. "You know," Graham said slowly, leaning slightly toward her, "I don't believe anyone does good without wanting something. Nothing is free. So what do you want from me?" Lila shrugged, picked up the mop. "Then think I'm crazy. As long as you're alive." Her answer was curt, detached, as if his life or death were nothing more than a small detail in her workday. But for Graham, that very indifference was what chilled him. Anyone wanting to exploit him would try to linger close, hint at opportunity, ask for something. But she did not. She spoke, then turned away, continuing her work mission done. "Wait." Graham's voice cut through, cold yet curious. "I've never seen you in HR records." "Who hired you?" "Not you," Lila replied simply without turning back. "A subcontractor. I just mop floors, no direct contract, no files, no ID, nothing. You're like a ghost." "Maybe so." She paused, glancing at him once more, half mocking, half indifferent. "But even a ghost knows the difference between clean orange juice and drugged orange juice." Graham said nothing. For a moment he felt uneasy, not because of her words, but because of the truth. He, a CEO, surrounded by lawyers, bodyguards, advisors, had to admit he'd been saved by a ghost from the basement. He left without another word, but his mind spun. That night, in his penthouse office, Graham sat alone. Reports filled the large screen, but his eyes fixed on nothing. The glass of red wine in his hand remained untouched. He thought about Lila's eyes, about her words, "I hate ugly deaths," about how she had vanished from every official record. He called Mateo. "I want everything on Lila Navarro." Mateo replied, "We already checked, Graham. No medical files, no driver's license, no social security. It's as if she hasn't existed for 40 years. The only trace, introduced by a cleaning contractor 8 months ago. The paperwork is murky." "Impossible," Graham muttered. "No one is that clean. If there's nothing, then it was erased on purpose." Mateo hesitated. "Maybe she was someone once. But if she wanted to hurt you, she wouldn't have warned you. Maybe she's the one being hunted." That thought silenced Graham. In the dark, he tilted his head. The idea that she wasn't a culprit but a survivor in hiding made him both wary and strangely drawn. "Keep digging," he said softly. "Go back 5 years. Internal probes. Women who reported misconduct and then vanished. I want a list. And Mateo, yes? Don't log it in official reports. This stays between you and me." Mateo nodded. The line went silent. Graham leaned back, eyes tracing the ceiling. On the glass wall, the city lights shimmered. He remembered that voice, carved into his mind like a blade. "Don't drink that glass." And for the first time in years, Graham Arden, the man who trusted no one but himself, realized he cared about a stranger enough to lose sleep. The next morning he returned to the hotel, not in a power suit, but in a plain white shirt and light gray trousers. A disguise just enough to make him look like an ordinary guest. He went down to the service basement. The supply room door was ajar. Inside, the fluorescent light flickered over shelves of buckets, mops, bottles of detergent. Lila sat on a wooden chair, bending to tie her shoelaces. When she saw him, she showed no surprise. She only asked quietly, half mocking, "Still alive?" "Still conscious," Graham replied, stepping in, "and curious. Don't you have an empire to run?" "You know who I am." "I mop floors, not blind." A moment of silence. Graham gave a rare smile, bitter, yet amused. "Then tell me straight. Who are you?" Lila lifted her head. Her eyes were deep, calm, but somewhere in them was a fracture hard to hide. She spoke softly. "I once had a name. Papers, photos, records. But one day, it all disappeared. Not because I committed a crime, but because I told the truth in a system built on lies." The room went quiet. Only the old fan spun, groaning slowly. Graham studied her, uncertain whether he should feel grateful or afraid. A woman with no identity, appearing at the right moment to save him. A ghost from the basement carrying an untold story. Deep down, he knew this was only the beginning of a much larger mystery. Night fell over San Francisco, laying a sheet of cold fog across the city. High above, towers of glass reflected the lights like blades aimed at the sky. In a Pacific Heights penthouse, Graham Arden sat alone before a wide window. A glass of red wine in his hand remained untouched. He could not drink. He could not. In his head, the same words played like a recording on loop. "Don't drink that glass." And every time he remembered, the image of Lila Navarro returned, hair tied back, eyes unflinching, her voice flat and chilling. Graham was not a man easily shaken. He had walked through ruthless deals where a single wrong signature could burn billions. But this was different. Not about money, but about life itself, his life placed on the scales and spared by a nameless hand. His fingers tapped the walnut table. Mateo Chen, his aide, had just left after giving a preliminary report. Lila practically did not exist in any official database. No medical records, no driver's license, no tax ID. A ghost, or someone deliberately erased. Graham closed his eyes, leaning back in his chair. He knew silence in records was never coincidence. In his world, pure white always meant absolute black. The next morning, Arden Meridian's headquarters towered like a glass fortress. Employees passing by lowered their heads. Graham strode straight into the main boardroom, ignoring polite greetings. On the desk, a stack of documents waited. The quarterly investment report routine paperwork. He flipped through page after page, eyes moving quickly. And then one line made him freeze. A $12 million allocation to something called the Creative Partnership Fund. At the bottom, a digital signature, approved by Graham Arden. But he had never signed it. He turned his laptop, logging into the executive system. In the e-signature logs, his name appeared, time-stamped with an IP address. Yet when he magnified it, one anomaly was clear. The IP did not point to the executive servers. It traced back to the communications department Sienna Vale's division. Graham's heartbeat thudded, not out of surprise, but recognition. The orange juice wasn't an isolated incident. It was a single link in a larger design. He dug deeper. Over the past 3 months, at least 5 other documents had been signed under his name, all accessed from that same IP, all tied to major investments, ownership structure changes, or stock transfers. Someone had built a script, using his signature to gradually transfer control. Late afternoon, Graham sat in the empty boardroom, papers surrounding him. He left the lights off, letting the golden sunset wash the room. Sheets of paper stacked like rigged cards. The door creaked open. Sienna Vale entered. She wore a burgundy dress, hair in waves, her smile flawless. "I've been looking for you," she said gently. "Tomorrow we have the photo shoot at Halbert. Don't forget, I've booked the stylist." Graham looked up. For the first time, he saw her not as his fiancée, but as a stage actress knowing exactly when to smile, when to hold hands, when to sound tender. "And if I cancel?" he asked, voice cold. Sienna chuckled lightly, pride flashing in her eyes. "You know me, Graham. If this door closes, I'll find another. I never lose." The words struck him. He had just reviewed forged signatures, and now the very woman opposite him declared, "I never lose." He didn't reply. She smiled again, stepping closer, her hand resting on his shoulder, a touch as false as makeup. Inside Graham, fire burned, but he swallowed it. He had long mastered hiding his emotions, waiting for timing. And now he knew the timing had not yet come. That night, at home, the penthouse felt cavernous. Abstract paintings stared silently from the walls. Graham poured wine, sat at the long oak table, laptop open. He logged into the highest security system accessible only to the CEO. There, more anomalies appeared. Shareholder clauses edited, voting rights altered, all signed under his name while he was in Europe. The signatures were authentic, but the actions weren't his. Graham clenched his jaw. He realized betrayal had reached into the very core. From someone he had trusted, the room was dead quiet. Only the clatter of his typing and his ragged breath. On screen, evidence mounted. A slow, intricate coup with one goal: remove him, replace him with a cleaner face, more appealing to shareholders. And that face, he no longer doubted, was Sienna Vale. Near midnight, the sea wind howled outside his window. Graham stood on the balcony, eyes cast down over the blazing city. Memories replayed, the orange juice, the warning, the forged documents, Sienna's perfect smile. He understood. The hand pushing him down was not a stranger. It was the woman who had once held his hand before cameras, whispering, "We are perfect together." But he also knew without Lila Navarro, he might already have fallen into the trap that very day. He lifted his phone, dialed Mateo. "Prepare everything, every log, every shred of proof. And Mateo, keep it hidden. For now, no one else must know." Mateo hesitated. "Yes, Graham. But what are you planning?" Graham looked at the moonlit water, his voice like steel. "I'll let them believe they still hold me. And when the spotlight shines brightest, I'll expose them all, right in front of the world." He hung up. Inside him, a fire ignited. The game of chess had only begun. Graham Arden's penthouse had always been famed for its cold perfection. Walls of glass, dark walnut tables, Italian chandeliers shining like an art gallery. But that night, the space no longer felt like a sanctuary. It had become a silent interrogation chamber where every small detail could turn into evidence. He had just ended a video call with European shareholders. When the screen went black, he stood, heading toward the bedroom. Moonlight streamed through the curtains, glinting off the vanity where Sienna Vale usually kept her jewelry. Then he noticed a drawer slightly ajar. He was not the type of man to pry into private things. But in the context of forged financial records, every anomaly mattered. He bent down, pulled it open. Inside, beneath a layer of silk handkerchiefs, lay a black phone, unlike any model he had ever seen Sienna use. No glitter, no case, no accessories. Just a stark, cold device hidden with care. Graham's heart thudded. He picked it up. No password. The screen opened at a touch. Too easy, and that ease made him cautious. Sienna was never careless, unless she left it there on purpose, or believed it would never be discovered. He tapped on the health app instead of heart charts. A hidden folder appeared. Phase 3, Takeover. His finger trembled. He opened it. Dozens of files spilled out, audio, images, scanned documents. Each title ablaze: transfer draft, voting clause, board shift. And first on the list, an audio recording. He pressed play. He doesn't suspect a thing. Sienna's voice, steady, precise. A deep laugh responded, unmistakable. Harlan Vexley, board member. Just place the glass near his laptop. Daniel won't check. Within hours, it's done. When he wakes, everything will be signed. Sienna again. I'll announce the engagement right after. The press will spin it. A devoted fiancé stepping in while he's exhausted. No one will question it. My image will be clean, strong. And him? Just a man left behind. The room stayed pitch dark. Graham sat frozen, hand gripping the phone, veins raised. Every word hammered into him. He moved to the next file. Arden's shares will be restructured. If he's deemed unfit, voting rights transfer to me as co-executive Sienna. Harlan, perfect. When shareholders see you as the savior, no one will resist. Graham stopped the playback, shutting his eyes. In his mind, he replayed the breakfast at Seacliff Regent, the orange juice, the whisper, "Don't drink." Now he knew. Without Lila Navarro, he would already have collapsed, becoming a puppet in Sienna's coronation. He opened the photo folder. Screenshots of emails filled it all, tied to altering shareholder clauses, with drafts labeled Restructure Proposal. Sender, Sienna Vale. Recipient, Harlan Vexley. There was no doubt. This wasn't only betrayal of love. This was a meticulously engineered corporate coup. Past midnight, Graham sat on the sofa, the phone's light casting shadows on his face. His gray eyes were no longer the cold of a CEO. They blazed with fury. He dialed Mateo Chen. Any updates on Lila Navarro? No, Graham. Still the same, blank, erased, all the more reason, Graham muttered. Only someone who's touched the truth gets erased that completely. He exhaled slowly. Mateo, I need you to help me decrypt everything in this phone, but keep it absolutely secret. If this leaks, both you and I will be branded accomplices. Mateo hesitated. Then, I understand. I'll bring the secure rig. But Graham, if what you fear is true, then Sienna doesn't just want to topple you. She wants to replace you permanently. No, Graham corrected, his voice hard as steel. She doesn't just want to replace me. She wants to erase me. But I'll be the one to erase her play. The next morning, Graham arrived at the office early. No black power suit, just a white shirt and gray slacks. Simpler than usual. Employees passing by stole glances. Their CEO usually looked like a statue of wealth. Today he seemed like a man bracing for war. In his office, Mateo was waiting. On the desk lay a secure laptop linked to the black phone. Files spread open, analyzed by special software. Waveforms of voices, metadata, timestamps. Undeniable, Mateo said, voice tight. That's Sienna's voice. And here 100% match with Harlan Vexley. They've been plotting for at least 4 months. Graham stood behind him, eyes locked on the screen. An email appeared. Harlan, the shareholder clause revisions are ready. Once he's deemed incapacitated, the board will transfer control to me. Sienna. Mateo glanced up. What's your plan? Graham stepped to the window, looking down at the streams of cars. I'll let them grow confident. I'll let them believe I've fallen into the trap. And when all lights shine on them, I'll turn the truth on full display. Before the world. He turned back, his gaze sharp. But to do that, I need a witness. Someone who cannot be bought. Mateo understood instantly. You mean Lila? Exactly, Graham said. The only person who warned me when everyone else stayed silent. If anyone dares to stand as proof, it's her. Mateo's face clouded. But we couldn't find records. She could vanish any time. Then I must find her before it's too late, Graham replied firmly. That night, Graham returned to Seacliff Regent's service wing. The hallway smelled of bleach, shadows clinging to chipped walls. He pushed open the supply room door. Lila sat on the old wooden chair, half her face lit by a flickering bulb. When she saw him, she only lifted her eyes slightly, unfazed. Still breathing? She asked flatly. And holding the reason I nearly didn't, Graham answered, holding up the black phone. Her eyes narrowed. So you found it. Not by chance. Without you, I'd never have made it in time. They wanted me gone vanished while they staged a perfect story. And you ruined their play. Lila laid her rag down, arms crossed. So you came here to thank me or to drag me into your game? I need the truth, Graham said, eyes steady. And I need a witness who can't be bought. You're the only one I know who fits. A faint, bitter smile tugged her lips. You think I'm a saint? I only hate ugly deaths. I don't owe you. Another rescue, maybe, Graham admitted. But if you don't help, the truth about those before you, the truth that erased your life, will remain buried. Do you really want that? Her silence was heavy. Her eyes glinted with something sharp, pained. Then she turned away, speaking low. You don't know what you're stepping into, Arden. This isn't just a corporate coup. It's a network that's existed for years, swallowing anyone who speaks. Then I'll tear it apart, with or without you. For the first time, her eyes wavered. Then she bowed her head, murmuring, Fine. But remember, when you stand in the spotlight, that light will burn me too, and I'm not sure I want to survive it again. Graham didn't blink. If we burn, then we burn together, but this time not in silence. In that dingy room reeking of disinfectant, two people from opposite worlds, a cold CEO and a ghost erased from records, became reluctant allies. Lila lowered her head, a fragile but real smile breaking through. You're reckless, Arden. But maybe. I'm tired of being a ghost. Outside, waves struck the rocky shore, booming like drums. For Graham, it sounded like a pact sealed not with pen, not with digital signatures, but with the gaze of two scarred survivors. And he knew, from that moment, there was no way back. The Seacliff Regent supply room still smelled thick of bleach, the fluorescent light flickering like the shallow breath of an old man. Graham Arden leaned against an old metal table, the black phone that had exposed the plot chilling him on the surface before him. Opposite, Lila Navarro stood with her arms folded, her slight frame swallowed by the faded dark blue uniform. She looked at him as if she already knew the question he was about to ask. "You want to know why I warned you," she said first, her voice curiously calm. "Fine. But once you hear it, there's no going back." Graham nodded slightly. For the first time, a fragile tremor appeared in his steely gray eyes. He was used to steering every conversation, but now he was the one who had to listen. Lila inhaled, her gaze drifting to the ceiling as if old images still clung there. 5 years ago, I didn't mop floors. I wore a suit, a name tag. Each morning I walked into the Manhattan government building. I was an internal investigator. I believed in rules, in justice standing upright if someone had the guts. Her voice dropped. One day, a young employee came to me shaking. She told me that at a party, a superior handed her a glass of orange juice, sweet, fragrant, harmless on the surface. Half an hour later, she lost her memory. When she woke, a contract had been signed in her name. She remembered nothing except the lingering, sweet, tart taste on her tongue. Graham clenched his hands on the table. A cold ripple ran down his spine. He remembered the lab report, scopolamine, the drug that clouds the mind, controls behavior, exactly what had been in his glass that morning. I began to investigate, Lila continued. I found camera footage, emails, even a trace of the drug before it was disposed of. I thought I'd won. But within days, the files vanished. The woman was transferred, then disappeared from the system. Me, from investigator to accused, fabricating evidence. I fought, I filed complaints, I shouted. A week later, my career file was closed. A month later, all my personal data had been erased, as though I had never existed. She laughed shortly, a dry rasp, not from humor, but from bitterness. Do you know what it feels like to wake up one morning and find your name gone from every record? The world treats you like a ghost. Every effort, every piece of proof, every oath. Reduced to ashes, Graham was silent. The yellow light revealed the tension etched into his jaw. That was the first time I stopped an orange juice death, Lila whispered. An ugly death. He didn't drink, but he died in another way, dead to truth, alive only as a breathing corpse. And I became the criminal. Since then, I hate ugly deaths. They're not loud or bloody. They're silent, and they cut deeper than any blade. The flicker of the light sounded like the room's heart skipping. Graham bent his head, staring at the phone on the table. Suddenly, all the pieces snapped into place. The orange juice at Seacliff wasn't random. It was the signature move of their scheme, a repeated formula, and Sienna Vale was the general orchestrating it. He looked up and caught Lila's eyes. At that instant, he saw no pleading, no fear, only naked truth. if what you say is true," Graham rasped, "what I face is not merely personal betrayal. It's a network that has existed for years, one that erased you, and now it aims to erase me." Lila shrugged. Her thin shoulders trembled slightly, but her voice remained level. "You're clever. But clever does not equal safe. When you expose something, the light can burn the one who speaks. I know I was once burned." Graham stepped closer. In his eyes was anger, but also something else, an unfamiliar openness he'd never shown anyone, a determined helplessness. "Then this time you won't be alone. If we must burn, we burn together. But the flame will consume the game, not just the players." In that moment, those two from different worlds, a cold CEO and a ghost erased by the system, stood facing each other in the bleach-scented room. No longer boss and unknown worker, no longer power and namelessness. They were two survivors, betrayed, finally seeing one another through the ash. Lila bowed her head and offered a fragile, genuine smile, so unlike the mocking ones before. "You're reckless, Arden. But maybe. I'm tired of being a ghost." Outside, the San Francisco Bay waves struck the rocks like drums. For Graham, the sound felt like a contract signed not with ink, not with digital seals, but with the look between two scarred people. And he knew from that instant there was no turning back. The Arden Meridian shareholder boardroom blazed with light, the high ceiling reflecting crystal chandeliers that glittered like a ballroom. Yet the atmosphere carried no glamour. It was dense, metallic like rust in a gilded cage. Every tap of the table, every whisper reeked of judgment. At the head of the long table sat Graham Arden. He wore a black suit, tie loosened, salt and pepper hair slightly disheveled. The look was no accident. It was calculated to make him appear weary, like a commander ready to lay down his sword. Behind the appearance, however, fire still smoldered in his steel-gray eyes. The doors opened. Sienna Vale entered, emerald dress clinging, heels clicking sharp. She smiled warmly at each shareholder, a smile polished enough to soothe every doubt. Behind her strode Harlan Vexley, tall, triumphant. They moved like twin arms of the same scheme, no longer bothering to hide it. An elderly shareholder tapped his hand on the table. "I believe the company needs youth, fresh strength." A few nods followed. Eyes turned toward Sienna. Harlan cleared his throat, his voice resonant, carrying the weight of a verdict. "For stability and investor confidence, I propose the creation of an interim executive committee. Mrs. Sienna Vale will serve as our face." The room stirred, a few claps, a few whispers. "He's burned out. Maybe change is needed." Graham slowly lifted his gaze, lips curving into a faint smile. "Makes sense," he said, his voice rough, as though conceding defeat. "If I'm no longer strong enough, the company does need a fresh face." The words came too easily, too smooth, enough to jolt both Sienna and Harlan for a heartbeat. But within seconds, Sienna composed herself, placing her pale hand over her chest, eyes glistening with fabricated concern. "Graham, you've carried too much. Let me protect what you've built. I only want what's best for you." He nodded, eyes half closed, as though he believed her. Inside, though, he knew predators relax most when prey bows its head. And Graham Arden had never died by surrender. Meanwhile, across the city, Lila Navarro left her cheap rental near the docks. Morning fog drifted, the bay wind carrying salt and rust. She wrapped herself in a gray coat, striding toward the bus stop. But the prickle on her neck told her she wasn't alone. A gaze clung to her back. She knew it well. For 5 years it had shadowed her like a curse. She bought coffee at a small corner shop. When she stepped out, she saw him. Gray jacket, cap pulled low, pretending to read a newspaper, but his hand was stiff as wood, and his eyes never left her. Her chest tightened, but her stride stayed even. She turned into a narrow alley leading to an abandoned container yard where streetlights didn't reach. His footsteps followed quicker. She stopped, spun around. "How long are you going to tail me?" He said nothing. He only raised his phone. The screen flashed a single message. "You know too much. Stay silent, or others will pay." Hot coffee sloshed down her wrist, burning. She didn't fear for herself, but others tightened her chest. "Graham," she gave a short, razor laugh. "Tell your boss I won't stay quiet. If I must, I'll scream it in the middle of the boardroom." His eyes darkened. Then he turned, vanished between rusted containers. Lila stood still, breath steady but deep. The burn on her wrist was just a reminder. The dark never stopped hunting her. And now it was wrapped around him, too. That afternoon, Graham returned to his office. Papers sprawled across the desk, financial reports, forged signatures, recordings from the black phone. He had just agreed to Sienna's interim committee, feeding them the illusion of victory. A knock at the door. Mateo Chen stepped in, face tight. "News on Lila. She was tailed this morning. They left a warning. They know she's the threat." Graham frowned, turning to the city view through the glass. Fog blurred the skyline, but his eyes shone with a cold light. "They think she'll flinch. But Lila won't, and neither will I." Mateo hesitated. "The closer you keep her, the greater the danger. She could become your weakness." Graham turned, his eyes flashing like blades. "Wrong. She's not a weakness. She's the anchor that keeps me standing." Night fell. Graham didn't return to the penthouse. He drove across the city to a small cafe in the Mission District. The place was dim, yellow light glowing over scarred wooden tables. Leela sat in a corner, gray coat wrapped around her. The coffee before her had long gone cold. When she saw him, she only looked up, unsurprised. On her hand, the red burn still showed. "They've found you," Graham said, sitting down. "Not new," she replied dryly, "but this time they mentioned others. That means you're already in the spiral." Graham leaned back, eyes locked on her. "Then we have no time. Here." He placed a file folder on the table. "Emails, photos, recordings, all from the black phone. The fire is ready. But to make it burn, I need you. Not a shadow. I need you to stand before them." Lila looked at the folder. Her hand trembled slightly. 5 years ago, she had stood like this, and been erased. She raised her eyes, steadying herself. "Do you understand, Arden? Truth doesn't save people. It tests who can survive it." "Then let it burn me," Graham said, his voice low but firm. "This time I won't stay silent. I'll stand with you." Her breath caught. For the first time, a flicker of light not born of defense, but of fragile trust, crossed her gaze. She nodded faintly. "Fine. But remember, this isn't salvation. It's a battlefield. And once you step in, there's no way back." When they left the cafe, San Francisco night was thick. Neon bled across wet sidewalks, stretching their shadows side by side. On a high-rise across the street, a figure lowered binoculars, lifted a phone, and whispered, "They've joined forces." Begin Phase 2. Morning broke gray over San Francisco. The bay fog pressed against the city like a heavy curtain, swallowing towers until they looked like half-built skeletons. Inside Arden Meridian headquarters, the air was no lighter. A storm was moving through the marble hallways, silent, calculated, about to burst. In the executive boardroom, shareholders gathered for what the agenda described as a strategic session. In truth, it was the opening act of a coup. Laptops gleamed under chandeliers, legal binders stacked like barricades. At the center of the long mahogany table, Sienna Vale sat radiant in ivory silk. She leaned forward with poise, hands folded, lips curving in a smile rehearsed 100 times. On her right, Harlan Vexley adjusted his tie, eyes glinting with certainty. They believed the stage was theirs. Graham Arden entered last. He wore a plain gray suit, the kind that stripped him of his usual aura of invincibility. His shoulders were heavy, his pace slower than usual. Deliberately so. He wanted them to think the hunt was over, that the beast had been cornered. The chairman cleared his throat. "We are here to discuss transitional leadership. Mr. Arden, your health and performance have been questioned. Miss Vale has shown extraordinary capability. The board will consider—" Sienna's voice cut in, warm and persuasive. "Graham has given his life to this company. But empires cannot rest on one man's shoulders forever. For stability, the shareholders deserve a fresh face." A murmur ran around the table. Heads nodded. The trap was closing. Graham lowered his gaze, fingers brushing the edge of a file before him. He let the silence draw out, long enough for tension to thicken, long enough for them to believe victory was theirs. Then he spoke, voice rough but steady. "You're right. Empires can't rest on one man's shoulders." He lifted his head, gray eyes slicing through the room, but they collapse faster when built on lies. The room stilled. For the first time, Sienna's smile faltered. Graham pushed the file into the center of the table. Audio recordings. Emails. Contracts signed under my name from IP addresses inside communications. All traced, all timed, all leading back to you. He tapped the folder once. The sound cracked like a whip. Harlan scoffed. "Fabrications. Anyone can forge." The doors opened. Mateo Chen entered, a small black speaker in hand. He placed it on the table and pressed play. Sienna's voice spilled into the room, clear, undeniable. "He doesn't suspect a thing. Just place the glass near his laptop. Within hours, it's done. When he wakes, everything will be signed." Gasps erupted. A chair scraped sharply against the floor. Shareholders turned, eyes darting between Sienna and Graham. Harlan shot to his feet. "This is manipulation. It's—" Another voice, his own, boomed from the speaker. "Perfect. When shareholders see you as the savior, no one will resist." The color drained from his face. Sienna tried to recover, rising gracefully, though her hands trembled. Out of context. Stolen. Edited. Her words rang too smooth, too rehearsed. And then the final move. Graham gestured toward the door. Lila Navarro stepped in. She wore no uniform tonight, just a plain gray blouse. Her figure was slight, but her presence pulled every gaze. "This woman," Graham said, "was the only one who warned me the morning they tried to drug me. She worked in silence, erased from every system, yet still chose truth. She is the witness you cannot buy." Lila raised her chin. Her voice was even, clear. "I watched the glass placed. I warned him. I saw who gave the order. And if I disappear again, remember, the evidence is already in safe hands." The room erupted. Questions, whispers, fury. The fortress of lies began to crack under its own weight. Sienna's mask slipped. For a heartbeat, raw rage flashed across her face before she forced the smile back. She turned to Graham, her voice trembling with venom. "You think this saves you? You've only started a war you cannot win." Graham leaned forward, eyes ice cold. "No, Sienna. I've ended one. Right here, right now. In front of everyone, outside the boardroom, corridors buzzed with chaos. Phones rang, reporters gathered, words spreading like wildfire. Investors demanded answers. Inside, Graham remained seated, unmoved, while Sienna and Harlan faced the unraveling of everything they'd built in shadows. For the first time in years, he felt something close to peace, not triumph, not relief, but the heavy satisfaction of truth no longer buried. And beside him, silent, Lila Navarro stood, not a ghost anymore, but flesh and presence no longer erased. The game of chess had reached checkmate, but Graham knew the board was far from empty. New battles would come, and now he would not fight them alone. San Francisco's skyline gleamed beneath the early evening haze, but inside Arden Meridian the air was storm-charged. News outlets swarmed the plaza, cameras flashing like lightning. Headlines erupted across tickers. Vale and Vexley accused in Arden coup attempt. Share prices wavered, not plunging but trembling, the market holding its breath. In the top-floor boardroom, Sienna Vale sat rigid. The ivory sheen of her silk dress now looked like armor cracked under fire. Her eyes, once shimmering with calculated charm, burned with cornered rage. Beside her, Harlan Vexley wiped sweat from his forehead, the man who had strutted in that morning, now resembling prey trapped in a cage. Graham Arden remained seated at the head of the table. His tie was loosened, shirt sleeves rolled up, a man no longer hiding behind polish. His voice was quiet, but every syllable cut clean through the noise. You used my name. You forged my signature. You plotted to erase me. And for what? To parade yourselves as saviors of a company you were prepared to poison? The word poison landed like a gavel. Gasps rose around the table. Sienna leaned forward, voice trembling but sharp as glass. Don't pretend you're some victim, Graham. You built this empire on ice. Cold, unfeeling, ruthless. I gave it warmth. I gave it a human face. And what did you give me? An engagement ring and a promise of power you never intended to share. Her words rippled, some shareholders shifting uncomfortably. She turned to them, her tone shifting into wounded sincerity. You've all seen it. He isolates, he rules by fear. I only tried to protect what he refused to. For a moment, her performance worked. Doubt flickered in the eyes around the table. But Graham didn't rise to anger. Instead, he pressed a button on the small black speaker again. Sienna's voice filled the room once more. When he wakes, everything will be signed. I'll announce the engagement right after. No one will question it, every mask shattered. No performance could survive her own recorded words. Harlan slammed his palm down, voice cracking. This is illegal surveillance. Evidence gathered without your consent. Graham cut in coldly. Funny. Consent seems to be what you both erase whenever it stands in your way. The boardroom froze. His words had the precision of a blade driven straight into their scheme. While chaos consumed the tower above, down in the hotel service corridors, Lila Navarro moved silently. Mateo guided her through restricted passages, shielding her from the press swarming the main lobby. She walked as if she belonged nowhere, shoulders tense, steps light. She was no longer invisible. Her face had been seen. Her voice had been heard. She was now a threat not just to Sienna and Harlan, but to the entire network that had once erased her. In the supply hallway, she paused. The bleach-stained walls seemed to close in. Her hand touched the old rag still tucked in her pocket, a remnant of the ghost life she had lived. For 5 years, she had been a shadow. Now, suddenly, she was thrust into light. Are you ready for what comes after? Mateo asked gently. She glanced at him, eyes unreadable. I was erased once. What's the worst they can do? Erase me again? But her voice quivered at the edges, and Matteo noticed. Truth was heavy. Light burned as much as it revealed. By midnight, Sienna and Harlan had been escorted from the tower, their futures uncertain. Legal teams circled. The press hounded. Their empire of masks collapsed in a single evening. Graham stood alone in his office. Outside, the city lights shimmered like a restless sea. He loosened his tie completely, staring at his reflection in the glass. For years, he had defined himself as unshakable, untouchable. Yet tonight, survival had not come from his own defenses. It had come from a whisper in a bleach-scented room, from a ghost who had chosen truth over silence. The door opened softly. Lila stepped in. She looked exhausted, her blouse wrinkled, her hair loose from its tie. But her eyes still carried that steady light. "You exposed them," she said quietly. "We exposed them," Graham corrected. Her lips curved, not into a smile, but something softer. "And now?" Graham exhaled, gaze drifting back to the city. "Now begins the harder part. Not survival, reconstruction, and finding out just how deep this network runs." He turned back to her, and for the first time, his expression shifted. Not the cold CEO, but a man aware of the fragile thread that had held his life together. "Stay. Help me finish this." Lila studied him for a long moment. Then she stepped closer, her whisper steady. "I'll stay. But remember, Arden, ghosts don't stay ghosts forever. Once the light touches them, they either vanish or they live again." For the first time in years, Graham allowed himself a faint smile. "Then live again, Lila. With me." Outside, the city roared, headlines burning through the night. Inside, in the silence of the glass fortress, two survivors stood together, not as CEO and ghost, but as allies forged in truth. And they both knew the storm had only just begun. The grand ballroom of Seacliff Regent glittered like a palace of glass. Crystal chandeliers scattered light into 1,000 shards. The red carpet stretched long, and television crews jostled for the best angle. On the giant LED screens, golden letters scrolled, "Arden Meridian, a new era." Guests in sequined gowns and tailored tuxedos murmured with anticipation. The whispers were rehearsed, fed by weeks of orchestrated leaks. Finally, a graceful transition. Sienna Vale is the future beautiful, capable, untarnished. The night was staged not as a corporate summit, but as a coronation. At the center of the stage, Sienna Vale shone in a gown white as frost, her every movement practiced, her smile a portrait of resilience. Microphone in hand, she spoke with velvet calm. The future demands clarity, stability, and a leader who carries not just numbers, but vision. "Tonight I step forward proud to safeguard Arden Meridian for all of us." The hall swelled with applause. Harlan Vexley, standing at her side, clapped first, his grin broad, like a conductor directing the orchestra of lies. Cameras flashed. The moment of triumph seemed sealed. Then static, a flicker across the LED wall. The orchestra faltered. A recording filled the ballroom, Sienna's unmistakable voice. "He won't suspect a thing. Just place the glass beside his laptop. By the time he wakes, everything will be signed. The press will spin the story. A CEO too exhausted, a devoted fiancé stepping in. No one will question it." The words cut sharper than any blade. Gasps erupted. Sienna froze. Her hand tightened on the microphone, lips still parted in a smile that no longer reached her eyes. Harlan lunged forward, trying to shield the screen, but the second file rolled on. If he's deemed unfit, voting power shifts to the board. You'll walk into the void, Sienna, and we'll divide the spoils. The name flashed on screen, Harlan Vexley. The ballroom ignited, not with applause, but with a firestorm of whispers and shock. Guests turned to one another, wide-eyed, clutching pearls and champagne glasses. Some rose from their seats, craning to see better. And then two figures walked the aisle. Graham Arden in a simple black suit, tie gray as steel, his expression unreadable. And beside him, Lila Navarro. No gown, no jewels, no practiced smile. Just a dark blue uniform, plain shoes, and eyes that refused to look away. The room tilted, cameras snapping furiously. A CEO returned from the brink, a ghost stepping into light. On stage, Graham took the microphone, his voice steady as stone. Before you believe the polished lies, look at the truth. This woman beside me is the only reason I stand here. She is the witness to what was meant to erase me. And tonight she will speak. He stepped back. For the first time in 5 years, Lila Navarro faced the world not as a shadow, but as herself. Her heart thundered. The lights were blinding, hot, but her voice did not tremble. My name is Lila Navarro. 5 years ago, I was an internal investigator. I uncovered a scheme using drugs to coerce signatures and orange juice laced with scopolamine. I filed reports. Within weeks, I was erased. My records, my job, my identity, gone. Tonight, the same method was used on Mr. Arden. And had I stayed silent, he would have been erased too. The crowd erupted, some horrified, some demanding answers. A journalist leapt to his feet. Do you have proof? Lila raised a small silver USB stick, her hand firm. Emails, recordings, fake signatures. Every piece they buried. Tonight, it all comes to light. Sienna's mask shattered. She snatched the microphone, her voice shrill. Lies! This is a staged performance. They're conspiring against me. Graham stepped forward, his gaze cold. Lies? Then tell them, Sienna, why your own voice spoke of the orange juice. Why you rehearsed your role as the grieving fiancée. The room went still. Sienna's mouth opened, but no words came. Harlan tried to back away, but cameras and flashes pinned him in place like insects under glass. Graham turned to the shareholders seated in the front rows. His voice carried the weight of steel and fire. I am not flawless, but I will not allow this company to be handed to predators who see people as pawns. And I will not let truth be buried again. If protecting it costs me everything, I will pay. He pointed to Lila. She is not a ghost. She is proof. Proof that the truth cannot be erased, no matter how deep you bury it. The hall thundered. Half the room stood in ovation, the other half murmuring in disbelief. But every lens had captured it. Every word was out. Sienna Vale's empire of illusion was gone. Lila turned her head toward Graham. In his gray eyes, she did not see the cold CEO of Arden Meridian. She saw something rarer, trust. Hard-won, unmasked. And in that moment, amid the storm of flashbulbs and accusations, she knew they had burned the stage to ashes. But together, they had lit a fire that no one could put out. The play was over. The war was just beginning. The night at Seacliff Regent did not end with champagne flutes and ballroom waltzes. It ended with the clink of steel handcuffs. Sienna Vale, once immaculate in her gleaming white gown, now looked like a fractured porcelain doll, makeup streaked, smile broken. As officers led her through the stunned crowd, she hissed over her shoulder at Graham, eyes burning with venom. You think you've won? This was only the first act. He did not reply. He simply watched her go, as one might watch a mirror shatter, reflecting back a life of betrayal he no longer wished to carry. Harlan Vexley fared no better. Struggling against security, his voice cracked with desperation. "You have no authority. It's all fabricated. Lies." But the giant screen behind him still replayed his own words, his laughter captured forever. The more he shouted, the more hollow he sounded. Reporters surged forward, microphones thrust like daggers. "Mr. Arden, do you have a statement?" Graham's answer was simple, grave. The truth speaks for itself. He stepped down from the stage. For a fleeting second, his hand brushed against Lila's. Her fingers were cold but steady, gripping back. And in that touch caught by hundreds of flashing cameras, she was no longer invisible. Headlines shifted instantly. "The ghost has a name, Lila Navarro." 2 weeks later, the city buzzed with fallout. Prosecutors moved swiftly. Sienna Vale was indicted for fraud, falsification of corporate records, conspiracy to defraud shareholders. Harlan Vexley faced investigation for abuse of board powers. Arden Meridian's stock plummeted, then clawed its way back like a heart shocked into rhythm after near death. Media narratives fractured. Some ridiculed Graham for entangling love with business. Others hailed him as a rare executive who refused to sell his soul to silence. But no one could deny he had walked onto the world stage and pointed to the truth. And Lila, no longer dismissed as a forger, no longer erased, was suddenly everywhere. The whistleblower who saved a CEO. The woman who refused to be erased. Journalists begged for interviews. Her reply was always the same: "I didn't return. I never left. I was forced quiet." Now I choose to speak in his office on the 42nd floor. Graham stood once more at the glass wall overlooking fog-draped San Francisco. Mateo entered with a folder. "The board wants you to stay on as CEO. They need stability. They need you." Graham remained silent for a long time, then slowly shook his head. "No, Arden Meridian doesn't need me to survive. But I need to live outside it." Mateo blinked, stunned. "This company is your legacy." "No," Graham said, a faint smile tugging his lips. "It was my chain, and it's time I unshackle." The next morning, a press release shocked markets. Graham Arden was stepping down, declining reappointment. To some, he was a coward. To others, a visionary. To himself, it was simply the truth. In a modest apartment across town, Lila folded her faded navy uniform and tucked it into a box. That uniform had hidden her, let her haunt hallways as a ghost. Now it was just cloth. A knock at the door. Graham stood outside, no longer armored in Armani, just a gray shirt, sleeves rolled up. In his hand was a paper envelope. Inside, official documents. Petition for restoration of records. Lila Navarro. Her breath caught. "You?" "I only opened the door," he said softly. "Crossing it is yours to choose." Her hands trembled as she held the file. After years of being erased, the weight of her own name felt heavier than gold. She blinked back tears, managing a faint, fragile smile. "I don't need the old job back. I only need the name." "Once more, and now," Graham whispered, "you have it." 1 month later, City Hall was packed. Reporters jostled. Judges read the ruling. Lila Navarro is hereby exonerated. Records from 2018 are null. She is recognized as a lawful investigator and a valid whistleblower. Applause filled the chamber. Lila stood in plain white blouse, not dressed for spectacle, but her voice rang like a bell. "I don't need apologies. I only want the world to remember that some truths are buried, but they never die. They wait until someone speaks. From the back row, Graham watched quietly, pride flickering in his steel-gray eyes. He was not the CEO now, not the savior, just a man finally free enough to bear witness. Spring came. North of San Francisco, in a small coastal town, a wooden house stood beside a new community center. Its sign read, "Harbor Haven, a safe place for truth." Children played in the yard. Women once silenced by abuse laughed in the kitchen. Inside, bread baked warm, filling the halls. Graham wore a worn gray sweater, hammer in hand, fixing a window frame. To them, he was just the tall man who brings morning coffee. Lila stepped out carrying a pot of orchids. She set it on the sill, then turned. Their eyes met. No words needed. She teased softly, "Do you remember the orange juice?" He chuckled, taking a glass she handed him, fresh, cold, pure. He lifted it, sipped, and held her gaze. "This time," he said, "I drink. Because I know what's in it." She tilted her head. "What?" "Trust." They sat together on the porch steps, the sea stretching endless and blue. Children's laughter drifted on the wind. And in that quiet, they understood. They had not just exposed a conspiracy. They had found each other, not for titles, not for contracts, but for truth which had carried them both back to the shore. Months later, headlines announced, "Reyes Arden Foundation launches scholarships for young investigators and law students dedicated to protecting whistleblowers." In the accompanying photo, there were no billionaires, no ghosts. Just two people seated side by side in a small hall surrounded by community, their eyes alight with one simple conviction: truth, though slow, always finds its way back. Some truths never arrive by court ruling. They don't come wrapped in headlines or verdicts. They slip into the world quietly through a single glass of juice left untouched, through 3 whispered words: "Don't drink that." Graham Arden once had everything: wealth, power, prestige. But only when he lost it all did he learn real strength lies not in balance sheets or corner offices, but in daring to speak truth even when your voice shakes. Lila Navarro once had no name, no papers, no trace she existed. Erased for telling the truth, she was turned into a ghost. Yet she chose to stand again, not for revenge, but to prove that truth, however buried, always fights its way back to light. Their story is not a fairy tale ending. It is a scarred journey, painful, halting, often despairing. But in the end, they found something simple, something unbreakable: trust. And for us listening here, the question remains. Every time we stay silent in the face of injustice, a piece of truth is buried deeper. But sometimes all it takes is one voice, one whisper to crack the darkness. If you've walked with this story until the end, ask yourself, when your moment comes, will you stay quiet? Or will you be the one to whisper like Lila once did, "Don't drink"? And if this story touched you, leave a trace, a comment, a share. Because somewhere out there, someone needs to be reminded, truth doesn't die. It only waits for one person brave enough to live with it. ChatGPT can make mistakes. Check important info.